Video, I'm going to be exposing corruption, and I'm going to touch on a number of different points. The Bible tells us have nothing to do with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. It's handy. I made this tea maybe an hour ago. It's in a thermos flask. So if you have a tendency to make tea and then be busy or whatever, have a few tasks to perform, or you're drinking a lot of tea and you don't want to be in and out, it's good to invest in one of those little flasks and keep it there beside you. It lasts the night. So there are a number of issues, corruptions in our legislature, which are unconstitutional. But it has exposed a bigger systemic problem. What's happening is Freemasonry has always been seeking to implement a new world order. They've known it was coming, and they've been working towards that goal. They've been working towards that goal. So the goal they're working towards is basically chaos. Now, chaos, when it's packaged, can even appear to be something rather organized. But ultimately, it's not. It's chaos. It manifests firstly in immorality through sin, indulging the flesh in its fallen urges. But then it manifests in the systems to accommodate the urges and to attempt to prevent anybody exposing the urges as chaotic. So that's the devil's end game. The devil's end game is to call evil good and good evil, because he's accelerating towards leading more people to hell. I particularly enjoy that tea from Aldi, the berry tea. Maybe they'll discontinue it now. So the point is that there are corruptions in society which are systemic, designed to accommodate further corruptions. So men who are corrupt want to have the appearance before the people as being straight. So they legislate for their corruption to attempt to hide it. And the basic corruption is this, and it's at the root of the leadership. Now in Ireland, they're telling the president that he can sign anything into the legislature that he wants, and he doesn't have to check it prior to signing it in for its constitutionality. In simpler terms, before he signs something into the legislature, he doesn't have to check if it's in line with the laws of the land. That's what they're telling him. Excuse me, tired. Up since early and under spiritual attack, so not sleeping very well at the moment. So, to tell a president in a democracy that he can basically function as a dictator is pathetic. It's highly unlawful. It's treason. They're basically telling the people now that you have to conform to this. You have to presume it's innocent. Sorry, presume it's constitutional. And in other words, presume it's the law even when it's not. You say, what are you talking about? Well, I'll flesh it out for you. If you tell the president that he can sign something into the legislature, like into what we should consider the law, without testing it for its correlation with the Constitution, in other words, to make sure that it's in line with the law before signing it in. So they're currently telling the president he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to check it for its constitutionality. He doesn't have to check it if it's lawful or not. But you have to obey it. They're saying, President, consider this bill that we want you to enact and to write into the legislature. And then he'll say, right, he'll have to go away and test it. And if he wants, he'll sign it in. If he wants, that's it. That's the only criteria. Because they're saying to him, you don't have to test this for its constitutionality. You don't have to test this for its lawfulness before signing it into the legislature and telling people that they must consider it the law. So they invented a term, presumptively constitutional. What? What's the point in writing the Constitution if they're just going to tell you to presume the legislature is constitutional? It's like, here, we wrote the law so that everything that correlates or extends or comes out of this or stems out of this eventually is lawful. So this is your gauge to make sure that anything legislated is on this trajectory and doesn't offend it or contradict it. Because if it contradicts it, then it's to be considered unlawful and can't be signed into the legislature. So what are they doing? They're just not having the conversation. They're signing something in, and they're choosing not to test it for its constitutionality because the legislature says they don't have to. Why would they not have to? That's not logical. That's not reasonable. Can you imagine you're the president and somebody comes to you with a bill and goes, here, will you check this bill and see if you'll sign it into the legislature for me? And the president goes, no problem, I'll sign that in for you. Have a nice day. You're thinking, well, surely there are some criteria. The president can't just sign in whatever he wants. Like everybody must wear pink wellies. It would be ridiculous. But it's equally as ridiculous to ask you to obey something that isn't lawful, even though the president could have checked it for its lawfulness. Oh yeah, wear the pink wellies. Are you sure this is the law, President? You must presume it is. But we have the Constitution so that we don't make these mistakes. And you must ensure that what you're signing in is constitutional. You can't sign. That's like saying you can sign things into the legislature that aren't constitutional when you say to the president he doesn't have to check. They're just being aggressively non-committal. They're trying to elude, to create the facade as though you can sign something in without testing it for its constitutionality. You can't. It would go against logic. So if it's going against logic, it's a demon or the devil doing it. Because they don't go with logic. They go against it. Because they're mad. So if the constitutionality of something ought to be tested, which is always the case, because you can't just have stuff in the legislature that goes against the law. But now they're saying you must presume it's constitutional if it's written into the legislature. You must. I must do something, but the president doesn't have to. So I must presume something's lawful and the president doesn't have to check. Are you for real? Are you being serious? I mean, I'm not being punked or on candid camera. This is real. You're not joking. The president is actually allowed to sign something into the legislature without checking with the Supreme Court first as to whether what he's signing in is constitutional or not. The president isn't a barrister at law. He's not qualified to make that decision on his own. So he must run it by those who are. And the fact that they're saying he doesn't have to, but you have to obey it, is tyrannical. It's not democratic. It's a tyrant. That's a dictator. It's not democratic. There's nothing democratic about it. The president could be bullied by people. You better sign this in or else. And now he could, even though it's unconstitutional. Somebody could go to the president and say, if you don't sign this in, I'm going to harm you. And there would be no system in place to protect him against that. Like, he can't say, oh no, I couldn't sign that in anyway because they'll test it for its constitutionality. So there's actually no protection there for the president either. Because he could have his life threatened. And he'd have to sign it in. And in doing so, there would be no automatic system in place that would produce a testing of the constitutionality of it before he signed it in, which would protect the Irish people. Even if the president himself wasn't corrupt, but corrupt people were threatening him, there'd be nothing in the system that's automatic to ensure that it's tested for its constitutionality first. Where is it? Where's the democracy? Where is it? Where's this democracy? Where are these democratic processes? Where are they? So the president can sign whatever he wants in, and it might not be lawful. Yeah. And we have to obey it. Yeah, that's what they're saying. That's what they're doing. And one such legislation is the Criminal Justice Act 2006, which came into effect in January 2007, which says guards can prosecute in court. Sure, we know they can't. It also says that they can represent each other's evidence. They can't. Sure, we know they can't. Not entitled to do that. The High Court this year ruled that they can't. So now my point is made perfectly clear. The High Court tested a legislature at least the parts of the legislature, which is saying guards can prosecute in court, and they found that they're not allowed to. So since 2007, it's now 2023. How many years is that? How many years is that? 16? 16 years later. It's still there in the legislature, even though the High Court told them that guards are not allowed to prosecute or represent each other's evidence. It's still sitting there in the legislature. 16 years. Something that is unconstitutional has just been let sit there because it was signed in and they didn't test it at the time for its constitutionality. 16 years before it was questioned. That's prime example as to why they shouldn't be allowed to legislate things without running them past the Supreme Court before they sign them in. Why? Because they're asking you to obey something that isn't lawful. So they're committing treason. Asking somebody to obey something that isn't lawful is treason. And they're claiming they can do that according to the legislature. That legislature is unconstitutional. The legislature that says the president can sign something in without testing it for its constitutionality is a crime. The legislature itself is criminal. It's treasonous. The legislature that says we must presume something is constitutional when it hasn't been shown to be or proven to be is a crime. You can't be asking people to do things that you don't know are lawful. So, now you know. These systems are being corrupted so that they can be further corrupted. And they're corrupted so that those who further corrupt them can sort of appear to be acting properly. But they're not. They're criminal cabals conspiring against the Irish people while they claim to be their politicians and judges and guards. They're Freemasons, part of the Freemasonic orders, Templars, Royal Arch, Jesuits, you name it. They're all in the same synagogue of Satan. They're all in the same bag of frogs. It's a madhouse. So come to Jesus today, be rescued, have your eyes opened, and you will see that they are a madhouse. But Jesus can restore you to see why they have gone wrong, how they have gone wrong, and he can educate you, discipline you, and counsel you as to how you should expose them. Blessings in Jesus' name. A holy kiss.